Hey there, welcome to U.S. History with Lennox. I'm Lennox, and today we are right smack in the middle of Time Period 4, which covers the years of 1800 to 1848. Our topic for discussion today, topic 4.3, politics and regional interests. What we're going to focus on today is how did the different regions affect the debate about the role of government in the early republic? What we're looking at, honestly, is the balance between national political interest and regional interest. The United States is coming out of the War of 1812, and that war put a spotlight on those competing regional interests. If you remember from our last video, the Federalists of New England were against that war, to the point where they held the Hartford Convention and threatened to secede if their demands weren't met. When we win the war, this wave of nationalism starts to sweep over our country. And that made the Federalists look really bad. But it also exposed the weaknesses of our country. You see, in 1811, our national bank that had been created by Hamilton and his financial plan expired. And we went into the war without any bank at all, which made it very difficult to receive credit in order to fund the war. The war also highlighted the lack of infrastructure that we had in our country. It was very difficult during the war to move both men and supplies because we didn't have established roads. Well, let me introduce you to Henry Clay. Henry Clay is going to propose what is called the American system. And the American system was set up to basically cure all the ills of America, specifically our economy. There were three main components to the American system. The first one is a system of federally funded roads and canals. This would benefit our farmers and our merchants throughout the country. The second component is federal tariffs. And as you may remember, tariffs are taxes on all imports coming into our country. That would benefit our U.S. manufacturers and protect their markets. Finally, the second national bank. A national bank would once again allow us to build credit and also maintain a national currency. Now, the presidents of this time period, often called the era of good feelings, were not too keen on the infrastructure part of the American system. They felt that that was more of a regional interest and that it was an overreach of the federal government to assume that responsibility. On top of that, both Madison and Monroe, being from Virginia, believed that an infrastructure bill would disadvantage the South. But the other two parts, the bank and the tariffs, those are going to be instituted right away. By 1816, they play a key part of our nation's economy. The other thing that's happening during this time period is westward expansion, and that's going to increase regional tensions in our country. You know, Americans, it's built in our blood to expand, and it was no different. And during this time, we were making our way as far west as we possibly could. And as people were rushing out to the west, these improved roads that were being constructed made traveling a lot easier, and it's going to lead to even more expansion. But that's also going to lead to a continual debate in our country about slavery. In 1819, Missouri is going to apply for statehood in our country. There were people already living in Missouri, and they had brought their slaves with them. So it was just assumed that Missouri would enter the country as a slave state. But the entry of Missouri is going to upset a perfect balance that existed in the Senate. Remember, whenever we talk about representation in Congress, it's always about who holds the power. And in the Senate at this point, there were 11 states represented that were non-slave holding states, and there were 11 states that were slave owning states. Should Missouri come in as a slave owning state, that would give the southern states or the slave holding states an advantage. The northern states, honestly, though, already had an advantage in the House of Representatives. Due to representation based on population, they had a lot more representatives within the halls of the House. Maintaining equal representation in the Senate would give the southern slave-owning states the power to block any legislation that might be detrimental to the South. So the debate became, should Missouri come in as a slave state or a free state? And what's going to make this debate even more heated is what's known as the Talmadge Amendment. The Talmadge Amendment, introduced by James Talmadge, was an amendment that would be added to the Missouri Statehood Bill that essentially said that after 25 years, Missouri would become a non-slaveholding state. Well, this worried the southern states because they believed that this was the first step towards completely eliminating slavery in the United States. And they were having none of that. It even got to the point where they said if the Talmadge Amendment was added and if Missouri was not added as a slave state, the South would secede from the Union. Once again, here comes Henry Clay to the rescue. Henry Clay is going to introduce what's known as the Missouri Compromise, also known as the Compromise of 1820. Those are interchangeable names. It's the exact same thing. What this compromise proposed would be to allow Missouri to come in as a slave state. And in exchange for that, a new state would be carved out in the north, and that state would be Maine. And Maine would be a free state. That would maintain the balance of power within the Senate. Finally, a geographical boundary, the 3630 line, would now mark in our country where slavery would be allowed and where it would not be allowed. Every new state that entered the Union above the 3630 line would be a non-slaveholding state, with the exception of Missouri. Every state that entered the Union below the 3630 line would be a slave-owning state. The compromise was accepted. Maine and Missouri came into the Union, and it seemed like everything was calm again. But was it? Thomas Jefferson, famously quoted after the passage of the Missouri Compromise, said, "But this momentous occasion," referring to the Missouri Compromise, "awakened me in the night and filled me with terror. I considered it the knell of the Union." What Jefferson is referring to here is the Missouri Compromise being the end of the United States. That word knell, that basically means the sound that funeral bells make. Jefferson did not see this as a solution, but just an extension of the problem. But that's going to be talked about in another video. Thank you for watching, and hit that subscribe button for me. Hit that like button as well. We'll see you on the next one.